So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. iPhone 14 Plus versus iPhone 13 Pro Max. A lot of people have been saying, don't buy this phone, just go get the iPhone 13 Pro Max. It's the better option. However, you got to remember that Apple stopped selling the 13 Pro Max. You got to go get the 14 Pro Max if you want it new. So you're going to have to turn to carriers that have some backstock, maybe a used or refurbed option, or maybe on a third-party site. So it's going to be a little bit of hunting, and I'm sure Apple's going to sell these refurbished as well in the refurbished section. However, I do have to say that the iPhone 14 Plus has been a little bit better than a lot of people are making it out to be. I'll discuss that in this video. Talking about the price, $899. That's US. Some people are saying this is ridiculously overpriced in other countries. We all know Apple overcharges in some other places, but here in the US is $899. The iPhone 13 Pro Max can be found now at these similar prices, maybe even cheaper than the iPhone 14 Plus if you look used. So you can get a nice bargain for the iPhone 13 Pro Max now. I've seen them as low as $750, so that's pretty decent. Now, let's talk about the differences in the build, in the body. First thing that strikes you right away when you look at these is kind of the materials that they use here on both phones. They do employ very different materials, but it's pretty similar to what they do on the Apple Watch line. So this would be more like the Apple Watch aluminum, and this would be more like the Apple Watch stainless steel. They're doing that here with the Pros and the regular line. So stainless steel material is actually a heavier metal. So the iPhone 13 Pro Max feels a lot heavier than the iPhone 14 Plus. And that's a pretty big deal because if you like a lighter large phone, the iPhone 14 Plus is a more comfortable hold than this device. The back material, though, is much more smudgy on the 14 Plus because it's all glass, whereas they have that matte texture on the rear. However, they trade again in the camera. So they have like reverse designs in terms of the materials they're using. You can see right here, 14 Plus stays cleaner. In the camera housing, it gets really gunky and disgusting inside of the iPhone 13 Pro Max or even the 14 Pro Max. However, I think the iPhone 13 Pro Max definitely has a more professional look to it, definitely more premium, and it feels the more luxurious phone. You also will see a SIM card slot there, and it's a little bit cleaner here on the 14 Plus as they went with eSIM, so it's a cleaner look on the edges. Actually, they have the same notches on the front and the same size height and width and screen, even the same bezels on both. At the bottoms, they do have the same exact punch holes in terms of the speaker. You can see those little holes right there. Lightning ports are in the same location and everything. Torque screws are in the same location on both of them. So definitely they're going to be the same there. And all the buttons are in basically the same location. As a matter of fact, iPhone 13 Pro Max cases actually fit. A lot of them fit on this iPhone 14 Plus, although the camera cutout is a lot larger. So overall, you're just basically dealing with a lighter, less premium feeling phone over here on the 14 Plus, but it's still nice. Whereas this feels like an ultra premium version of that phone, same notches and everything. All right, so when it comes to displays, Apple is basically using the iPhone 12 Pro Max display on the 14 Plus. It's the same nits, it's like the same 60 hertz, so you're essentially getting a 12 Pro Max display here for this phone. On the 13 Pro Max, they up the brightness to 1000 nits and you get 120 hertz. So technically the premium display is on the 13 Pro Max. Not that this is not a premium display on the left, it is. It's a Super Retina XDR. It's just they decided to forego that refresh rate, and that is definitely annoying a lot of people. I think the next Plus will probably have a smoother refresh, but for this one, you are going to be dealing with 60 hertz. Now, is it a big deal? Well, you used iPhones for several years without 120 hertz. Even Android phones had that a couple years. Apple still was making iPhones, and nobody seemed to care. Millions were still buying iPhones. So I understand they now have it and you now have the option, but at the same time, that doesn't make this a total write-off. It still has the same pixels per inch. It still has basically the same color accuracy, and there is a trade-off. When you get this, 60 hertz, it does allow you to get a little bit better battery life as it doesn't require as much power. The iPhone 13 Pro Max was still great with battery life regardless, and the iPhone 13 Pro Max technically does have the superior display here. But again, to me, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I think it is a definite win for this phone on the right. But if you're still looking for a good display, the iPhone 14 Plus can provide that. Now, I will say though that the notches are exactly identical. So if you are, viewing photos and videos and stuff like that, they're going to look about the same. They're going to get in the same way up there at the top. So you can see you'll cut into the content the same exact way. So that's not going to be any different. And I do think that, unless you're not looking side by side, I don't really think the average user is going to care either way. And some people say once you go 120 hertz, you can't go back. I don't tend to agree with that. I'm switching to the iPhone 14 Plus right now. I actually have my main SIM in here. And as long as I don't do these comparisons or make these videos, I start to forget about it actually after a little while. iOS, you have to remember, iOS is still a very smooth operating system. So the iOS experience is still smoother on 60 hertz than some Android phones on 90 hertz. I've used Galaxy A53s, and I know that's not a comparable phone. That's a budget phone. Why would you even mention that? I'm just saying, it comes down to software too. That does matter in terms of performance. iOS is still smooth, regardless of the fact that it doesn't have the 120 hertz here. And I'm not giving Apple excuses. They need to put that in the Next Plus. But the iPhone 13 Pro Max wins it out in the display category for sure. It's brighter and smoother. So let's go ahead and discuss the difference in software. Now I have the Apple Watch right here. I'm going to take a picture of. This is not a big difference. There's only one difference between both of them, and that is in the camera area. For cinematic video, you now have the option to toggle between 4K 24 and other modes. They improved this greatly. It's very good now. It was not like it was bad before, but it's better now. You have that action mode camera up there, and you only have the 0.5x here on this phone for the camera software. Also, if you go into settings for the iPhone 14 Plus and you scroll down into the camera area, go to formats, there's no raw settings or nothing like that. Now, on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you have the same exact software, app library, widgets, same iOS 16 experience. However, when you go into the camera settings, you have a macro mode down here. You don't have macro mode on there. In video, you have the same video settings, but we don't see the 4K 24 up there. In addition, no action mode, but it does add the raw mode right there. So you can do raw photos on here. Now, if I go over in the settings, same thing on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, scroll down to camera. And yes, that 120 hertz looks very smooth there. You can see photo capture options available, Apple Pro RAW and Apple Pro Res. So essentially the camera area is where you'll see a difference in software. Other than that, when you are using these day to day, they feel identical. Same control centers, same apps, same app library, same experience. They both have A15 chipsets, so they should be updated for the same length of time. Now, I will do a speed test soon on these two phones before the end of the year, but I have to mention that the iPhone 14 Plus, while it looks the same on the surface, it actually is the same silicon, the same chip, A15, clocked at the same speed, same memory. There's one difference. It has better thermal management. So it's not going to get as warm as an iPhone 13 Pro Max. That is a slight benefit to it, but only very slight. They have essentially the same GPUs, and CPU benchmarks would probably perform about the same. They do open apps at about the same exact time. Difference though is that the user will probably think the iPhone 13 Pro Max is faster when really what they're seeing is smoother. It's not necessarily faster, it just appears faster because the display literally refreshes faster. So what I mean is that the average user who puts these side by side would notice or think that the 13 Pro Max is quicker. Overall though, the iPhone 14 Plus is actually a more efficient phone because it has a better thermal design for the CPU. Overall though, either way you go, you're getting essentially the same chip, and if you find ProMotion more important to you, the 13 Pro Max is the winner here for sure. Other than that, I can use either of these and be very happy. They're both blazing fast. And now storage is a win to the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And the reason for this is because the storage capabilities of this phone go all the way up to 1 terabyte. You can't get 1 terabyte on the 14 Plus. However, where it's a win for the iPhone 14 Plus is that, yes, it does push over that $1,000 range, but you can get 512 gigs on this phone for $11.99. Now, that might seem like a horrible deal to some who only care about 120 hertz, but when you look at a 512 gig iPhone 14 Pro Max, for example, you're looking at well over $1,500 with tax, something like that. So you're paying a lot less for way more storage on a 14 Plus. So if storage matters a lot to you, that can be a better value. But overall, 13 Pro Max wins this one out just because it has higher storage capability options. Now, cameras. Both these cameras are actually quite similar when it comes to their main camera experience, but there is quite a few differences. Now, the iPhone 14 Plus, we already talked about those software differences, has the photonic engine. So essentially what this is going to allow this phone to do is kind of like give you better machine learning. So when you take a photo, it kind of just knows what to do in the background. And not that you don't have deep fusion on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you do, but this new photonic engine allows you to even more, like we already knew iPhones know how to take photos without any skill, but it's getting even better now. So images are going to be better with the dynamic range, better overall results after processing. It's going to be easy for the average user. So this is definitely the better camera for somebody who doesn't know how to use a camera that well or don't really care to go into the professional grade of things on this phone. This definitely the more easy automatic camera on the iPhone 14 Plus. The front-facing camera is also very easy and has autofocus, another automatic feature for people who don't want to manually focus on things when doing selfies and vlogs and stuff like that. They both have portrait and panoramic. And overall, I didn't do a comparison with the cameras yet, like just the photo samples, but I can tell you right now that they're pretty close in their main setups. Now, the iPhone 13 Pro Max is going to benefit from giving you a telephoto, but you got to ask yourself, how much do you zoom? Do you like zooming? I do. Definitely like zooming. So I missed the telephoto when using the 14 Plus. It's a great feature, especially when you're out and about traveling and stuff. You just can't reach something. Also, the 14 Plus doesn't have the beautiful macro mode. This is something I greatly miss when using the 14 Plus. However, you can just crop in on your image. Still, it's extra work. I love having the macro mode. That's pretty neat. And if you want to do video and cinematic stuff, they don't have the 4K 24, so it's missing that. But overall, it's just got the extra lens, the RAW mode, and other than that, a little bit of a worse front-facing camera, but only by a hair. It's not like a big deal. So on the whole, the 14 Plus is actually a pretty well-rounded camera, but the iPhone 13 Pro Max is the more feature-packed one here. I think if you want slightly sharper photos, easier, the iPhone 14 Plus will give you that. The iPhone 13 Pro Max is the more pro camera though, for pro users and people who are going to really take advantage of camera. So definitely pick this if you're more into photography, videography. 14 Plus, if you just want an easy snapping iPhone camera that just does all the work for you. Battery life is not too much different here. We're talking a difference of like less than 100 milliamp hours on the differences here. The 13 Pro Max having a slightly larger battery than the 14 Plus. However, due to this using 60 Hertz and the better design of the A15 chip in here, I do feel like I'm seeing slightly better battery life on the 14 Plus than I see on my 13 Pro Max. And when I say slight, I'm talking a difference of maybe like 30 minutes to an hour. Now, Apple rates the 13 Pro Max longer on video playback, but I'm getting a longer rating for iPhone 14 Plus on audio playback. I'll have to test video, but I'm just seeing this phone to remind me something of like an 11 Pro Max of back in the day when it just kept going and going. 13 Pro Max just kept going and going last year, but since I downloaded iOS 16, I can't say the same. It hasn't been just as good as it used to be for my 13 Pro Max. Overall, though, both these phones are all-day battery life phones. They're not bad. They're actually some of the best ever made from Apple. So definitely either way you go, you're getting a full day, not even trying hard. And if you don't use the phone that much, both of these will stretch into 2. Now, both the iPhone 14 Plus and the 13 Pro Max do have dual speakers, and I have to tell you that the 13 Pro Max sounded a little bit deeper, a little bit richer, but not much louder. They both were about the same loud, and both of them sounded very good, so they're good there. One area, though, that I do have to say is better for the iPhone 14 Plus is the reception strength for 5G. It does have the new Qualcomm modems in here. It's a slight upgrade over the older version, so you're going to get better 5G performance. That is a pretty big deal for those of you on the go. So slightly better overall mobile performance for the iPhone 14 Plus. Definitely, this phone has always given me the full amount of bar strength so far. This also does have emergency SOS via satellite coming soon and emergency crash detection, something the iPhone 14 or 13 Pro Max does not have. And this also has Bluetooth 5.3, so when you are connecting via Bluetooth devices such as the new AirPods Pro 2, for example, it's going to be slightly quicker, something most people probably won't see. So technically there are some superiorities in the iPhone 14 Plus that are just minuscule differences. But the 13 Pro Max has the great benefit of feeling like the smoother, buttery smooth 120 hertz phone. So that's definitely why a lot of people are saying just get the 13 Pro Max. You get the extra lens, you get the more premium feel. But the thing here is to note though, is that most people probably, if they're deciding this, they're probably not even looking at the Pro line. But I wanted to do this whole comparison just so you can see the real differences between both of them. I'm honestly loving the new 14 Plus simply because of its lighter weight and having a red option. I want a red option in the Pro, haven't seen it yet, but I'm liking the lighter feel, just kind of like the daily use feel. I don't always use the extra Pro features all the time, but when I do, I've been missing some of the Max features like the macro mode, for example, and the zoom. But obviously, if you're looking for the latest and greatest and saying I have a 14, you might want to get the 14 Plus. If you're okay with being on last year's model, you're going to get some great benefits over choosing this over the 14 Plus. So either way you go, you're going to get a good experience. But if you want the all-out best, you got to go to the 14 Pro series. We all know that. And if you just want to wait it out a little while, the 15 and 15 Pros should be even better than both these options. So thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know your thoughts. Would you pick a 14 Plus or an iPhone 13 Pro Max down below in the comments? I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.